Hello, everybody. Welcome to LettermenRow.com. I am Jeremy Birmingham. This is Talking Stuff, the Ohio State recruiting podcast, brought to you by Buyers Auto. If you're looking for an auto, head to buyersauto.com. If you're looking for Ohio State recruiting stuff, stay right here. Myself, Zack Carpenter, and Spencer Holbrook will be breaking down what we think are the biggest visitors heading to Ohio State for the Buckeyes' big home game against Penn State this weekend. Let's get to it. We're back. I'm back. Spencer's back, and Zach's back. Spencer is back, and I know everyone misses him. Spencer, how are you? Are you happy to be back talking stuff? Hashtag.
Sure. Yeah, it's been great. But are beginning to do your thing and gain some chemistry together. I don't need to be here every time.
Wow,
You guys can handle it.
I didn't miss him at all.
I'm not sure I believe you though, Spencer. I don't feel like you didn't really sell me on that. Anyway, talking about selling, it's time for the biggest recruiting weekend of the season for Ohio State. And we're going to try, folks, to go class by class, break down the visitors as we have them, and understand, as always, these lists are tentative. Even if a kid says he's 100% confirmed, it's tentative until he arrives. So that's the way college football works.
I think we need to add a tag for every story we do. Lettermen Row is not liable for the teenagers who do not show up for these games, who told us they're going to show up for these games.
Right. I mean, they got to travel across the country, and they got to get up early and drive across storms and all those things that are happening. So,
some of them can't find rides, Berm.
Yeah, Christian Miller. So I guess that's a good place to start. From what we talked about on Tuesday night's show with Zack and Andrew, Christian Miller and Shamar Stewart, who we mentioned as part of the defensive line group that was expected. Neither one of those two are coming to town. Both of them in the class of 2022, so we can take them off. But that doesn't mean that the class of 2022 doesn't have some real impactful players coming into town, including Zack, Spencer, 13 of Ohio State's 16 commitments. And why is that important, Spencer, to have everyone together?
That's like a big Buckeye Bash. Zack and I were talking about what to name it, and I think we came up with Buckeye Bash 2.5. I don't think this is quite the 3.0. Maybe that happens.
How long did it take you guys to come up with that?
I wanted the Buckeye Bash 1.5, like the Lion King 1.5. And then Spencer and I had a peace offering because we both like that movie. So now the fight's off for now. The pay-per-view fight.
It did take a couple minutes to come up with that name, but there's a lot of headliners in here from this 2022 class, and I think it's important that all the commits come together with the biggest names still on the board for the Buckeyes, because it's one thing to do it in June when recruiting opens back up and everybody's just excited, but that steam kind of seems to be settling down from when the summer happened. And so I think to get guys like Caden Curry, Hero Kanu, Omari Abor, around the commits and make sure they know what the vibe is with this entire class, Xavier Wampa, Zion Branch, even the offensive linemen, you got to know who you're going to be playing with and who you're going to be in the locker room with. And I think this is a huge turning point for the Buckeyes class. This could decide whether you have a top 2 or 3 class or a top 5 class, because of the commits are going to play such a huge role, especially with being a big game atmosphere. These coaches don't have time to talk to them. So the peer-to-peer recruiting is going to be even more important this week. And I think that's why you see 13 of the 16 commits. It's just so important to get those guys here.
So Zack, 3 of the 16 commitments are not going to be there. Who are they?
Kenyatta Jackson, Terrence Brooks, and we just said a second ago, Terrence Brooks.
Bennett Christian was the third.
Bennett Christian. Bennett, I thought it was lining up like he was going to get here, but he was here for the Maryland game a couple weeks ago and was able to put in his own peer recruiting on guys like AJ Harris. So at least he got that one.
Yeah, AJ, I think, Bennett has someone in his family is graduating from an ROTC or something, and he's going to be unavailable because of that. His brother's graduating from the National Guard this weekend, so he's not going to be there for that. So yeah, I mean, you have 13 of the 16 commitments, and as Spencer alluded to, not just a couple of the biggest names remaining in the class of 2022 for Ohio State, but literally every single top defensive target is coming back for this weekend. It is the first visit for Jimmy Rolder, the linebacker from Illinois, who has become one of the hottest recruits in the country in the last 3 weeks. And that one's an important one to watch for Ohio State. They really, really like him. Heard some comparisons to Pete Werner on Rolder. And if that's the case, then certainly nothing to scoff at there, just because he's a kid who didn't have an offer a month ago. But ultimately, this is about the defensive line and the secondary, having Xavier Wampa, Zion Branch together again with Kai Stokes, having Caden Curry, Hero Kanu, Omari Abor all together. and having them to really get an opportunity to work alongside CJ Hicks and Gabe Powers, and just to kind of get familiar. And then you have the kind of the wild card guys, right? I mean, Marvin Jones Jr., the #1 ranked player in the country, according to On3 Sports. Like, if you have just a shot, that's really all it takes with Larry Johnson. It's just one real connection to happen. And at 6'5", 250 pounds, I'm not personally as high on Marvin Jones Jr. as the On3 rankings are. I think he's obviously a very good player and nice, family legacy as a Florida State kid. 6'5", 250. If that's the starting point, you can work with that if you're Larry Johnson.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And like we had talked about on the last episode, Larry Johnson always seems to have like that one guy he's working in the shadows. So I guess, even though I think we've all been kind of selling the idea that Marvin Jones Jr. could be a realistic option, with Larry Johnson, the defensive lineman is kind of one of those positions where you never know for sure whether or not they're going to be where they are on the board regardless. So it was kind of funny to me looking through the list, like through the offers, other than Christian Miller not being here and obviously Chris McClellan. There's really offensive or defensive. There's not really a main target left in the 2022 class that is not going to be, or is not expected to be, on campus. I mean, obviously there's Anai White, but I think the Buckeyes kind of fell out of the mix for him.
That one's off, yeah.
And then on offense, the only position left to recruit is offensive lineman. So if Earnest
and the two guys that they're going after the most are going to be there in Earnest Green and Carson Hensman. So your point is valid. I mean, this is what the Buckeyes have done. They've taken such a sniper approach to recruiting this season, and because they've been so focused on fit as opposed to just this broader scope of trying to find guys. And if you look at it on the offensive side of the ball, as you said, Carson Hensman and Earnest Green, they will take both of those guys if they both want in. But Cam Dewberry, that's over as far as Ohio State's concerned. Enai White, that's over as far as Ohio State's concerned. And so now you really look at it, other than maybe Carson Tabaracci, the linebacker from Utah, who's expected to take an official visit for the Michigan State game. Like, this is it. This is the weekend. I mean, so it's hard to underscore the importance or to understate the importance. So you have 4 official visitors in Hero Canoe, Earnest Green, Marvin Jones Jr., and then Caleb Brown, Ohio State commitment, the wide receiver. So that's the group that'll be there the longest. But guys, this is the weekend for the class of 2022 to figure out, as Spencer said. Right now, they, believe it or not, folks, Ohio State's still number 4 in the country in the class of 2022 with the rankings, despite only having 16 kids committed, and despite losing Quinn Ewers, despite losing Jaheim Singletary. Like, this is a class that was on its way to being a record-setting class, and it has slowed down as the Buckeyes have parsed down numbers. But if you go out there and you seal the deal with Caden Curry, with Hero Canoe, with Omari Abor, and Xavier Wampa and Zion Branch, all of a sudden you're looking at a much, much different class moving forward.
I personally believe that this is already, because I've actually, with covering the team and it being the fall, and we got Zack now on board at Lettermen Row, so I can kind of take a back seat as far as recruiting goes, and I've been focused more on the team. But like, to me, and I think Austin would agree with this, when you look at the way they're building this class, it looks like a national championship level class. I mean, you've got depth at offensive line, you've got depth and the 5-star pedigree at linebacker. Wide receiver is taking care of itself. You've got the running back you need. The secondary looks to be shaping up pretty well. I think I'm of the opinion that you're going to get at least one, if not both, of Xavier Wampa and Zion Branch. Like, the level of recruiting right now at Ohio State, it may not finish with the #1 class because it's not going to take 38,000 kids like the SEC schools do. But you're looking at a national championship level class if you stack it on with what they did in 2020 and 2021 and what they're going to do in 2023. This class is very, very talented. And I think, like you said, Berm, to have a late October night where guys from all over the country, it's going to be chilly, but it's not going to be November cold where guys get turned off by it. It's going to be a rocking environment that we haven't seen at Ohio State for a long time, because you don't get a lot of these big night games anymore because of what Fox does with Big Noon. To have the alternate uniforms, to have everything that's going on, and to potentially have a party with the way Ohio State could blow the doors off of Penn State, potentially. it all sets up. It's almost the perfect storm of recruiting, and I think I'm paying attention more to what happens in the aftermath of this weekend rather than what happens on the weekend in general. I think that you could see 3 or 4 guys commit based on this weekend. I think it's that kind of level of weekend for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead, Zach.
So I had 2 questions that I wanted to ask you guys about this 2022 class before we wrap up. But before that, real quick, just to hit on Spencer's point again. I think there's a lot of disappointment, at least a little bit of disappointment for fans, because the 2021 class was 7 5-stars. Is, I mean, one of the best recruiting classes of all time. And there was a point in time where the 2022 cycle seemed like it was going to compete with that 2021 class as far as point totals, 5-stars go. And we've seen that dip a little bit, but it's not going to have, it may not have the star power at the top of the 5-star prospects and all that. But when we look at the list of guys still left on the board, this could, I mean, they could compete for a top 2 finish all time for Ohio State as far as the average player rating goes. I know we're thinking 2021 signees in the class, and we could see it ascend as one of the top signing classes in Buckeyes history as far as that goes. Anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's just funny how people's perspective is, because if you look at it, if they finish with Xavier Wampa and somehow Marvin Jones ends up in the class, and then, you know, all of a sudden, and maybe who knows what happens with Drew Aller down the road, like, oh, that would only be 5-stars in this class, and that's disappointing. You know, I mean, it's just a weird world. And I know everyone wants, like, you know, it's the girl from Willy Wonka. I want it now. Everyone wants it now, but like, that's just not. What's her name? Violet. You're turning violet, Violet.
When you said I want it now, I was thinking JG Wentworth.
Not a sponsor. JG Wentworth, not a sponsor.
Byers Automotive is, however. Byers Auto is a sponsor, and we're talking stuff. And now let's move to the class of 2023. If there's a star group in this class that's coming to Ohio State this weekend, it's the offensive side of the ball in the class of 2023. There are some flat out studs. I don't know if we're going to have time to go through all of them, but Zach, why don't you run us through the big ones?
Yeah, obviously, Richard Young, I would have him. He's a 5-star running back who, when we did the list a couple weeks ago with me, Berm, and Andrew, he was one of the top 3 or 4.
Yeah, he was number 1, other than Sonny Styles, on everyone's list.
Yeah, and I think Ohio State's in a great position with him. Tony Alford's putting in some work. Travion Henderson's putting in some work there, so I think they're in a good position there. You got Dante Morit, who I believe is the lone quarterback target visiting this weekend. Justice Haynes, another 5-star, borderline 5-star running back. Wiltrell Hartson is an in-state running back from Massillon, who Ohio State's definitely in on. They haven't offered yet, but I could see that happening down the road, especially if they want to bring in 2 running backs. And if Richard Young or Justice Haynes is the number 1 guy, then Wiltrell Hartson would be an awesome second running back in that class. And then you have both top receiver targets in the 2023 class that Ohio State's looking for a smaller receivers class in 2023, and Carnell Tate and Zachariah Branch, their top 2 targets at the position, are both going to be here. Obviously, Zachariah Branch is visiting with his brother Zion, and then Luke Montgomery and Josh Padilla on the offensive line, two of the top targets on offensive line in the class, and both in-state guys. Who do you guys think out of all those would be probably like the number 1 target that's coming in that class?
I'm back and forth between Richard Young and Carnell Tate. Obviously, I think that those 2 have been proven just by the attention Ohio State's paid to them, how many times they visited. This will be the 3rd visit for each in the last 5 months. I just think it's pretty clear those 2 are very high on Ohio State, and that Ohio State has been all over them. And I think that from a immediate standpoint, I think we're not far away from Zion Branch and Zachariah Branch making their college decision. And this sort of trip for that family is very important to make sure that they're comfortable with the distance from Las Vegas and to get to know Brian Hartline a little bit for Zachariah. They know Matt Martins and Kerry Combs and Ryan Day pretty well from the official visit for Zion in June, but I think it's that group.
I'm going to go a little off the radar. I'm not going to answer your question, Zach, but I'm going to keep this thing moving.
I love it. I love it.
some of the guys that I am kind of looking at, the guys that jumped off to me when we were at camps and just, you look at the tape, like Troy Bowles was really impressive at camp. He'll be here, and that's important for Ohio State. I think he's the kind of guy that you want your class to become a pitch man, to become a recruiting almost coordinator on the defensive side. Jaden Asbury is a guy who's immensely talented. I think he's got superstar potential. And then one way off the radar guy that I'm actually happy to see visiting, Chris Culver from North Carolina, is a 6'2", 6'3", 175, 180 pounds. Not as tall, I don't think, but he kind of moves like Ben Victor. He played both wide receiver and corner at camp. When we saw him, I talked to him after camp. He's a really nice kid. Really flying under the radar. I think he's, a top 60 wide receiver in the class, but I also think he's just going to continue to rise because that size is hard to teach. You can't teach size and you can't teach speed. He moves really fluently. I actually thought he would end up being a safety, but he's a wide receiver now. And I think that is the kind of guy who, if you're looking for a small class of guys and you want maybe a depth wide receiver and not just taking 5 stars like Brian Hartline, has become accustomed to, Chris Culver is the kind of guy can really set the tone and become one of those under the radar guys in this class. Just my opinion. I think he's a pretty talented kid that people should watch out for.
Yeah, if you go top to bottom in the 2023 visitors coming into town, obviously it starts with Sonny Styles and Richard Young and Carnell Tate. But then if you look at the defensive line, Caden McDonald is a monster, 6'3", 325-pounder from Georgia, a teammate of Jordan Hancock's at Sewanee, so North Gwinnett High School. You have Keith Sampson Jr. from North Carolina, who Ohio State is super high on this kid. He camped in the summer. He's one that I really think the Buckeyes are probably going. I feel like that's one they're going to win, and I don't know why necessarily. I just think that they've really dove in there earlier than most. And I agree. I think from the linebacker perspective, if you have Sonny Styles and Jaden Asbury and Troy Bowles all on campus together, that it's all about relationship building. And then in the secondary, Elliott Washington's returning for his second trip to Ohio State from Florida. Christian Gray coming in from St. Louis. I asked him on Thursday, hey, how much you talking to Ohio State? And he said every day, all the time. And these kids, the Buckeyes aren't bringing in kids that they're not interested in, and that's why even a kid like Chris Culver, who flies under the radar and doesn't have an offer, is still important to watch. That's a kid Kevin Wilson's recruiting very hard down in North Carolina, and they're not, especially a weekend like this one. The Buckeyes are not going to bring in kids that they're not interested in. And Culver is one of the handful of kids in North Carolina that they're still looking at. And it's going to be a really, really important weekend in the class of 2023. Anthony Brown, the Minnesota receiver commit from Springfield, Ohio, he'll be there as well. But this weekend really is all about Luke Montgomery, Josh Padilla, Sonny Styles getting a chance to continue to grow that in-state bond and then get to really, really tighten their relationship with Richard Young, Justice Haynes. I honestly believe that Richard Young and Justice Haynes could end up in the same class, and I think Ohio State could be that spot because they're going to take 2 running backs in that class.
Yep, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility either. For that to be the 2 class, and but if they only get one or the other, I do, like I said a second ago, to hammer it home, I think Wiltrell Hartson. I think Berm and I were talking when he camped at Ohio State, like he was one of the more impressive offensive players that we saw in his class this summer, especially from the state of Ohio. And to bang on your point with Montgomery and Padilla, it is starting to get to be that almost that time where that the Buckeyes need that in-state class leader in the 2023 cycle to start building that class from within. And I know Ohio State's made a little bit of a push with Luke, like, hey, we want you in the class sooner than later. I'm sure it's the same way with Josh, where they need to start branching out and sort of that from Ohio out, as from the inside out, as Ryan Dade has said in the past. Going to the 2024 class, Berm, can you tell us a little bit more about there's 3 quarterbacks. There's 3 quarterbacks in the 2024 class visiting, and Ryan Montgomery in the 2025 class. Jayden Davis, Adrian Poste, and Dylan Raiola, if that's how you say his name, Dylan Ravioli. Can you tell us a little bit more about him? I know he's a guy that you've been really high on.
Well, hold on. We've completely buried the lead. Jayden Davis is visiting again. He's the best quarterback in the country, regardless of class right now.
Everybody knows how high I am on Jayden Davis, so I had to have someone else come through and
we've buried the lead, folks. 25 minutes in, we've buried the lead. Go ahead, Berm.
Hello. Yes, it's me, Berm. Look, man, Dylan Raiola is a superstar. I'm going to be very clear. Everyone knows that I'm probably, if I had to be labeled, I'd be Team Jayden Davis, because I really think that what I saw out of him this summer was so much different than I've ever seen from a sophomore quarterback prospect visiting Ohio State. The maturity, the physical attributes, everything was just so much different. But Dylan Raiola is a really, really good quarterback. He's got NFL bloodlines. His father was I think, a Remington Award winner at Nebraska. This is a kid that is a super athletic kid. Zack, you'll love this. He actually got put on the Ohio State radar by Rob Sims, who
Oh,
Dominic
Zack,
Raiola. So there's your G. Scott connection.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. The Seattle G. Scott. There we go.
Because Dominic Raiola played with Rob Sims in the NFL, and Rob Sims reached out to Brian Hartline, according to Raiola, who told me that, and that's how they got linked up and started those conversations. So you're talking another kid, 6'3", 200 pounds. He's in Texas. The kid plays high level competition. Really, really good quarterback. Has offers from everyone already: Alabama, Georgia. Georgia's the presupposed favorite here, but that's just because Georgia's the supposed favorite to land everyone in the country. So I think these sort of visits, Ohio State has not offered him. If they don't offer him after this weekend, I will be very, very, very surprised. And maybe that puts a touch more of a push on Jayden Davis. But again, and he's been here now, I think, 56 times since June. So it's clear that Jayden Davis is very high in Ohio State. It's clear the Buckeyes are very high on him, but they did offer Adrian Posey before they offered Jayden Davis. So it's not like these kids don't have competition. Yes.
And one thing to keep in mind, everybody loves to recruit Texas. I don't think anybody loves to recruit Texas more than Corey Dennis and Brian Hartline. If they can find a quarterback in Texas, they're not going to be shy about it at all. And I think that's one thing to keep in mind. Jayden Davis, like we said, I think he's the best quarterback in the country. Maybe Cade Klubnik probably is better right now, but I think by the time Davis gets to be a senior, he'll be one of the best quarterback prospects we've seen in a long time. But the bottom line is, if Ohio State loves Jayden Davis, but at the same time, if you can go down to Texas and get a quarterback, especially with Corey Dennis as your quarterbacks coach and Brian Hartline as your wide receivers coach, those guys love Texas guys. And I think this is one of those things where don't be surprised if they start to make a push for Raiola just because of the Texas factor. Because, if you see a kid playing against high level competition and throwing the ball really well in Texas, you're going to have to take a shot at it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, and plus there's, of course, that looming reclassification potential issue with Jayden Davis, maybe ending up back in the 23 class at some point. Jayden's also, I mean, he's got a lot of things he's considering there in North Carolina. The competition he plays against is not great, and he is actively desiring a chance to play against better competition and to keep sharpening his skills. So I don't know. I mean, if you look at Ryan Montgomery, and we talked about him already this week, the 2025 quarterback, maybe the best 2025 quarterback in Ohio, probably the best 25 quarterback in Ohio as a true freshman starting at Findlay. That's Luke Montgomery's brother, for those people out there, the uninitiated. And Notre Dame offered him last week. Michigan's already offered. Tennessee's already offered. Georgia Tech's already offered. Georgia's making a big push. All these schools are also the same schools trying to sway Luke Montgomery away from Ohio State. And it's not a knock on Ryan, but he's still at least a year away from an Ohio State offer. And I hope that he and his family understand that the Buckeyes are in a position where they have to be patient. These other schools aren't.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to them a couple of weeks ago, and I think the Montgomery family is pretty they know and respect that Ohio State doesn't offer in-state quarterbacks that early. So I don't think they're expecting an offer to come around the corner anytime in the very near future. And it's not, I don't think that Ohio State has to offer Ryan to get Luke. So that's where my stance is on it.
Yeah, I agree.
I will make it 3 agreements on this show.
So Spencer, if you love Jayden Davis so much, is he your most important visitor for the weekend?
Absolutely not. All of those in-state guys are far too important for this particular game. He's been here enough where he knows his standing in the Ohio State class. He knows where he falls in the pecking order. I don't think, actually, if I had to list them, I would say he's one of the, this is not a knock on him at all. I just told you what I think of him. But this might be a hot take. I think he's one of the least important visitors because it's just another visit for him. It's a chance to see a night game atmosphere. But at the same time, it's not as important to make an impression on him because he already knows where he stands. And so if you can, talk to Troy Bowles and Jaden Asbury and Richard Young and Justice Haynes and these defensive linemen in 22 and make them, make it known, hey, we're trying to prepare for a game, yet we're still taking a little bit of time to say hey to you on the sideline, or, make sure that that you're welcomed here. Those guys are far more important. I think Jayden Davis is very clear, and Ohio State's made it very clear what they think of him. And so if you had to give me a list of, the most important, I would say he's near the bottom just because he already understands where he's at.
I think that is a hot take, but I think I agree. I think it's actually interesting because Jaden Davis may be the one showing Adrian Prose and Dylan Raiola around. I mean, he might be their tour guide. You don't know. Zack, let's dive into our list of most importance. Okay, let's do it. What do you say? Before we three kings of Orient are giving our predictions or our hot list, Andrew has said that his is Zion Branch, Earnest Green, and Hero Canoe. That's who he says his three are. So let's do ours. Spencer, why don't you just start since you already just told Jaden Davis to not come?
Okay, this is going to be a thing now, I guess. Okay, my number one most important visitor is going to be Carnell Tate because I think he's going to make a decision very soon. I mean, isn't it known he's going to make a decision pretty soon?
He was supposed to make a decision October 8th and then pushed it back and then said maybe next spring. But it seems like, and I think Zack was just going to say that he seems like a kid that could pull the trigger at any time.
Yeah, and the Notre Dame visits were important. I think Ohio State, it's one of those things where Notre Dame levels it out, and then Ohio State can elevate itself. I think this is the nail in the coffin if everything goes well. So I'll go with Carnell Tate. Then second, I'll go with Xavier Wampa. I think he's a Minkah Fitzpatrick type player. I think he's a can't miss safety that Ohio State absolutely needs in its defense at some point. And then I'll go off the radar because I know everything that you guys are going to say. The headliners are the headliners. I'm going to go with Jimmy Rolder. I think the linebackers could use another guy in this class, and I think to get a guy go from under the radar to now 4-star prospect, going to be maybe a top 100 by the time this class is over. If you can get a third guy like that, the linebacker room is talented right now, but if you can restock it with 3 top 100 guys and 1 5-star, I think your defense can be set for a long time because we already know what the defensive line is going to do. It's going to continue to restock itself. If Al Washington can pull off Jimmy Rolder and get 3 guys from the top 100 in that class, I think it elevates the potential of the Ohio State defense and it takes it to a championship level moving forward.
I like it. Bold. Zack, who's your 3?
Do we want to have some fun and we all have to say someone different?
Sure, why not? Like elimination?
Yeah, exactly. Like an eliminator pool. So Andrew said Earnest Green, Carson, Hensman, Zion Branch.
No, he said Earnest Green, Zion Branch, and Hero Canoe.
Okay. And then Spencer said Carnell Tate, he's coming back supposedly on November 20th. And with receiver, I think when we did the list, it was sort of Carnell Tate was a little more toward the bottom. So I don't think he would have been on my 3 most important total. But I can't believe no one said Caden Curry yet. So I'm going to take him off the board. I knew Berm would have gone right there. Berm's top 3 would have been Caden Curry.
That's not true.
I'll go Caden Curry, Amari Abor, and I feel like all the defensive linemen have to be on this list. I'll put those 2. And then I'm going to say Richard Young because I think getting him back on campus for a 3rd time since the summer, that's huge as they make that push. And that's how highly I think of Richard Young and how perfectly that running back succession plan lines up with Travion being in his 3rd year by the time Richard Young would hypothetically come in for his freshman season. So those are 3 I got.
Okay. I'm going to have 2 lists because it's my show. The first list.
Oh, it's your show. It's not our show.
Correct. The first list is the real list or the 2022/imminent list. And that's Caden Curry, Xavier Wampa, and Zion Branch. Those are the 3 most important. They have been the most important players Ohio State's been recruiting defensively in this class for more than a year, each of them. That 3 is never changing. However, Sonny freaking Styles is going to be back at Ohio State on Saturday, and he is absolutely the most important player in the class of 2023 that the Buckeyes are recruiting. He is the most important player in the state of Ohio. He is the most important player for national perception. He is the most important player for the future of the defense. He is the most important player visiting. period.
It's the first time you've gone on record saying that Sonny Styles is important.
Sonny Styles is the most important player visiting, period, bar none. So let's just make sure we're aware. That's it. But if I'm forced to pick a more nuanced list, I am going to, I like the visit of Marvin Jones Jr. I think it's important for Ohio State to go out and put themselves in a position with a player who is ranked as the number one ranked player in the country. He is a kid that has NFL potential. So I'm going to put him as number 2 on my list because of the fact that I think there's this perception around the country, and I don't know what has caused it. Like Iowa and Notre Dame analysts saying, "Oh, the Buckeyes are out of it for Xavier Wampa." Georgia people say, "Oh, the Buckeyes are out of it for Christian Miller," just because, it's like all of a sudden people are forgetting that no one other than Alabama has recruited at this level for longer than Ohio State. So I don't know why this idea is that the Buckeyes all of a sudden can't recruit with the big boys, and it sort of feels like people have this perception, and I don't know why. So just to go back out there and kind of give the Marcus Hall to everybody and say, hey, we can go anywhere in the country and get whoever we want, I think is important. So I'm going to say Marvin Jones Jr. is second, and then I am going to pick for my third and final is Luke Montgomery, because again, I think in state, in Ohio, the Buckeyes have to make sure that those players, Luke's the number one ranked player in the country or in the state on the offensive line. He can play all 5 positions on the line. He can play defensive line. He is a Pied Piper in the class. People love him. And I think it's very important that Ohio State eliminate any of the doubt that the Montgomery family may have about how high the Buckeyes prioritize Luke or what they, how they view him, because, there is a perception inside of the state that if Ohio State offers you, you're supposed to go there, and that can't be complacent on Ohio State's part. They can't be complacent about it. They got to go out there and really prove it. So to me, 2 of those 3 guys visiting from the state of Ohio, and Sonny and Luke, and then I'm going to add Marvin Jones Jr. just because of that big national poll. But the obvious answer, Caden Curry, Xavier Wampa, Zion Branch, and then Sonny Styles over everything. Yes.
Can I finish out the show? We only have 4
minutes.
I'd love you to. I just wanted to make a little point, and I'm glad that you guys had me on at this exact moment, even though, I'm not really welcome here anymore.
Well, not with that attitude.
Out of our club.
So anyways, I think this is almost Ryan Day had almost a watershed moment after the Oregon game where he had to really, figure out what the issues were and make sure that he was, on the right track as a head coach in year 3. Year 1, when they had these visits, it was still Urban Meyer's Ohio State. Whether you want to say that or not, everybody still knew Ohio State as Urban Meyer's Ohio State. Last year, there weren't allowed to be visits. For game day visits, Urban Meyer was a closer. And as the recruiting cycles wore on, Urban Meyer was the ultimate closer. I think this weekend begins a 2-month watershed moment for Ryan Day, where it is no longer Urban Meyer's Ohio State. It is no longer, anything to do with that era of Ohio State. This is Ryan Day's Ohio State. And I think these next couple months, and I think it all starts Saturday and into Sunday with these official visitors. If you are going to be the closer that Urban Meyer was on the recruiting trail and be able to dominate and really, kick ass the way Urban Meyer did on the recruiting trail, the next 2 months are going to be crucial, because that first year you still knew Ohio State as with Urban Meyer. The second year you weren't allowed to have visits. And so I think this year is going to be huge for Ryan Day to prove to everyone. I'm not questioning whether he can do it, but to prove to everyone, I'm just as good, if not better, of a closer than the guy before me was. And that's a scary thing to think about for other teams around the country. But I think if there's one guy that can do it, it's going to be Ryan Day. So I think this weekend kicks off what could be a very important stretch in the tenure of Ryan Day at Ohio State.
Yeah, not just wrapping up the class of 2022 either, but for kickstarting the class of 2023. With Ty Lockwood in town, it's an opportunity for Ty to get his group together. And I think that this is the type of visit. It reminds me of some of the old games back in 2013, 2014, 2012, when you had Darren Lee and the Bosa's and all these guys together for a visit, Joey and Zeke and all these guys on the sideline. These are the moments that these kids build something important. And that's why it's so valuable for Ohio State to get these kids back on campus. Not just the class of 2022s they're trying to wrap up, but to really, as I said, jumpstart the 23 class. And who knows, maybe you find yourself a 2024 quarterback in the near future. Anything's possible in a world where you believe.
And speaking of quarterbacks, just to put end of the show here, Devin Brown, notable non-visitor. I think there was some talk that he might. It sounds like he's going to be on campus at some point. That's the plan anyway, to come down for an official visit, maybe sometime after the season's over. But I think he would be probably on all of our lists of at least top 5 most important visitors if he was coming this weekend. But not happening.
Yeah, exactly. The Buckeyes are still on the prowl for that 2022 quarterback, and all of the talk about what's happening in Happy Valley only makes it easier for them to be patient and wait it out to see what happens with Drew Aller. If maybe you get lucky and something kooky happens at Penn State. So that's where we'll wrap it up. That's Zack Carpenter and Spencer Holbrook. I'm Jeremy Birmingham. This has been Talking Stuff, the Ohio State Recruiting Podcast, brought to you by Buyers Auto. Please head over to lettermenrow.com for all of your Ohio State needs, and subscribe to be a part of the On Free Network for $10 for the first year. Join us in our Lettermen Lounge and talk about this stuff and more. Thanks for watching. See ya.